Next is the final reading of the general fund budget for 2015, 2016, and I believe we have a presentation. Is that correct from, no. Okay.
We bring to you this. We certainly made presentations on May 4th, May 18th, June 8th, and what I'm bringing to you this evening is the same proposal that we brought at the public hearing on June 8th, and we're asking for a final reading approval of this proposal, which would establish our budget at $166,451,021 for the budget year 15-16, and the proposal includes a 15.7 mil increase, and this is the recommendation again that we brought you on June 8th. The administration is happy to answer any questions you may have.
Okay. First, we'll start with a motion, and then we'll go into discussion. Mr. Gant.
Madam Chair, I'd like to move that the board approve the administration's recommendation and give second reading approval of the 2015-2016 general fund budget in the amount of $166,451,021, and note that this proposal includes a 15.7 mil increase, which includes the current millage cap and the catch-up as allowed by the South Carolina Code of Laws, Section 6-1-320A2.
Okay, do we have a second? Mr. White?
I'll second.
Okay. Now I will open up the floor for discussion. Questions? Ms. Hammond? Or Ms. Lovelace? I'm sorry.
You'll let me? Okay. I'm going to take a page out of Ms. Turner's book of reading something so that I don't amble or rattle off, but it's about this. I understand the importance of a unified board on something as important as a budget, and I can assure you that we all are unified in keeping this an extraordinary district. I think where I differ, and I may be the only one, or there may be others, is to ensure sustainability for the future. And I believe we all have important insights that we bring, and we need to continue that for the students of District 5. But my concern is for the business community and what a huge impact this may have with a 17.5 mil increase. And I know that our schools depend on families moving in, and jobs bring families in. And I'm not so arrogant to think that I'm right with my solution, but I am standing strong against this huge increase at one time because I have studied the figures. The revenue and the expenditures must be used to realize that our budget is growing each year. There's a huge amount of inflation, as Mr. White pointed out in his presentation. There's also just the cost of living goes up in things like energy. And I know that we have had to deal with Act 388. I know we have dealt with unfunded mandates and inflation all over the years. And I feel like we need to have planned better. And so my concern is that the amount of this. I want to fund the budget. I support funding the budget. But I plan to make an amendment to it, but I'll let people discuss before that. But my concern is, Ms. Hutchinson, is more of the amount at one time. It's not against having to raise taxes. I know that this district supports good schools, and I know that as long as they feel the taxes are fair and needed, I know that we have community support. But I question the validity of doing this right now at this time in this amount.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Hammond. Ms. Lovelace?
I'm also going to kind of piggyback on Ms. Hammond. I do think with the 15.7 mil increase, that will, well, what happens with what I've done in mine, and it generates about $625,000 more dollars than what, you know, what we're asking for to meet the $3,094,100, you know, for the deficit. And I just think that at this time, you know, with wages being flat and everything, I think it's really hard to ask our taxpayers to pay more than what we need to ask for. So I actually think we only need to ask for what we need. And I think I heard that actually if we raise the mill to what we need would be 13.06 and not 15.7. And but at this point in time, I do think I wish that we would consider the fact not to do that, because I do think that the taxpayers are, you know, that we could hurt our taxpayers because, like I say, the wages are flat, and I think we need to think about that.
All right. Any questions or discussion over here? I have a question, just before that.
Yeah.
You mentioned the 13.6 mils, not 15.7. Did I miss something?
Huh?
Is it 15.7?
Excuse me, I think there's a little bit of confusion. Our budget is increasing by a little over $3 million. However, we're about $3.7 million short of funding our budget. I think that's where the confusion comes in. So the 15.7 will cover the $3.7 million shortfall needed to fund our budget.
Okay, so
What-
15.7 will fund the total that Mr. Gant included in his
According to the latest information we have, yes.
Okay, thank you.
I'm confused. Now, am I not correct that that our deficit is $3,094,100?
That is what our budget is increasing over the current year. Bear in mind, we're budgeting, and we'll probably dig into our fund balance to the tune of about $700,000 this year. So that's why it's taking a little more to fund our budget than it is. In other words, this is why it's taking a little bit more than $3 million to fund our budget for next year.
Ms. Lovelace, does that clarify, or you?
I'm working on it. Yeah.
Yeah.
So-
Ms. Hammond?
Now, if I have an amendment to it, you want to wait till everybody's discussed it. I just didn't want it to have the vote till I had the chance to give my, or should I do my amendment and then get voted up or down? Which should I do?
I don't know, Mr. White's the next
You wanna
one, would
speak
you?
first, and
Do you have a
Yeah,
preference?
can I put my slides up again? I'm not going to go through them in as much detail, but I refined some things that I want to share with y'all.
Okay, well, we'll
Okay.
just wait. It might
Okay.
be less
Do you have a
complicated.
remote?
You just tell me which.
Okay, thank you. So, Mr. White?
And for people that were here last time, I apologize if this is repetition, but I just finally decided to write my conclusions down. These are my conclusions from looking at our budget. And because we talked a lot last time, and I have some charts, but what I think that we really have to understand is we can't make budget decisions in a vacuum for one single year. We have to look at them over time. And whatever millage we pass on today is going to show up as cuts in the future. I mean, it's an inescapable conclusion. And if you look at it, our annual step increase, which we're required to give every year, is more than the maximum amount that we can collect by raising millage. And our normal, I'll refer to as a CPI millage increase. And so every year we have, this is just one expense that goes up. And the extra revenue we can access all has to be applied to the step increase. There's no millage left over to pay utility increases. There's no millage left over to pay any cost of insurance, any growth in the schools. And more importantly, in addition to the step increase, we now have the General Assembly shifting money away from our budget to fund other school districts that have poor demographics. So we don't have any millage increase to fund any of those things. And this doesn't happen just once. It's a cumulative process that happens year after year after year. So basically, we're compounding deficits faster than we have access to revenue. And if we let go of any millage, I mean, we're in an impossible situation. And I think the broader issue here is we have to start a broader conversation with our community. We have to start a broader conversation with our General Assembly, because it doesn't matter how much we cut. If it doesn't change, if our funding mechanism doesn't change, we're destined to generate this school district, because we're going to be laying off lots of staff in the future. And if you, and I'm going to just flip through these charts very quickly, but it's an impossible situation that this is going to come up every single year. We're not going to have a way out of this. This was a chart I showed last time about spending patterns. I'll make it just real quick. When people move into this district to repopulate homes, those families are going through their maximum spending, and that begins to level off and cycle down about the time their kids go into college. To the extent people move here to put their kids in school, our businesses benefit, because they've got families that are going into the peak spending and acceleration mode, and once they go past that college, it all goes down a decline. If these schools degenerate, these people will stop moving here, and our businesses are going to have bigger problems than property taxes. The investments in these schools, they're not going to have the level of customers that are here today spending money. This is just another depiction of what the relative age groups spend. And people with empty nesters and retired, they start shrinking and spending less. This was, just real quickly, our budgets from 7 years. Half of those increases are a step increase. I mean, half of what's, and you don't need any additional students. We have step increases year after year after year. And in the last 7 years, our budgets have gone up an average of about 4%. This year, and this is what we're going to confront year after year, growth, 768,000. We know we have growth. Every community that's opening new schools, they're going to spend some extra money on staff to fund those schools. Our community voted to approve these schools, and with that comes those costs. But nobody knew in 2012, when we declined that millage, and had we known this, I never would have voted to decline it. We thought we were giving people a break because the economy was bad, but last year, $1 million was shifted to poorer districts. And what we understand the General Assembly's talking about doing again next year. We have nothing to cover that with except cuts. That's the only way we can cover that. Inflation, that includes our step increase. It includes things we don't have control over. These are the cuts that were made to bring us to a balanced budget with the maximum millage. This is just real quickly. If we want to assume we're going to pay everything out of fund balance and never raise millage, here's what happens. Every year, what we don't fund, we fund out of fund balance. We got to pay it again the next year, and then we have a step increase on top of that. We've left this step increase at $2.4 million going forward, which is what Lynn Richardson's estimate it should be. It actually is going to be larger than that, because it increases upon itself. So this is a conservative number, but each year we have another layer of a step increase. And if we're paying that out of fund balance, we'll completely deplete our fund balance in the first quarter of 2019, because these costs reoccur year after year if you're not cutting. And so it brings us to, and I pushed it forward 7 years because we've got to start looking broader than our current year, but these are huge numbers if you're going to say we're never going to raise millage. If we're going to, what this chart is now going to, this next one to show, if we're going to just cut, it doesn't accumulate. So these yellow boxes going down the diagonals are what we'd have to cut every year to balance our budget. And over the 7-year period going forward, we'd have to cut $17.5 million to balance our budget. That's no millage increases, doing nothing new but dealing with the step increase. This doesn't consider utility increases. It doesn't consider any other, gasoline increases, doesn't consider insurance increases. And if we did that by cutting administrative positions first, and this second arrow at the bottom of 2019, that's the time we would have cut every single administrative position out of our budget. So, I mean, this stuff about cutting, it sounds good, but you can't make ends meet. If we raise the maximum millage this year, it's $3.7 million with the 3-year catch-up provision, and you look at the CPI increase every year going forward 7 years, these green boxes below that are now netting out what we could conceivably raise a millage. And these numbers are understated, these step increases. We're still carrying deficits forward. We still have at the bottom negative numbers that are going to need to be cut. And that's only one cost increase. That's all of our millage being applied to one cost increase that comes every year by operational law. It doesn't even deal with the cost increases that we have no control over. If you look at the yellow boxes, if we cut the excess on an annual basis, and if you look at that final yellow line at the bottom, those would be with maximum millage increases into the future for 7 years. We still have a 0.3 deficit we have to cut. This is only covering the step increase. There's going to be other cost increases. So over 7 years, there's $2.1 million in cuts just to balance our budget with the step increase, but that ignores any additional increases we may have. And if you look at this chart, anything we leave off of this millage will either be a deeper cut or it'll show up as a recurring expense. And this $2.1 million just grows. And that is going to be people that are going to be cut somewhere. A reality we talk about and a reality we're going to have to deal with at some point in time, because one of the inequities of Act 388 is that some school districts raise their millage faster than ours before Act 388 froze your base level funding. So we have Lexington 1 across the dam that raised their millage historically faster than ours. They have more money than we do on a recurring basis, even when you adjust for the difference in pupil populations. And when our competitors like Lexington 1 or District 2 downtown start giving raises, we're not going to be able to compete, or we're not going to be able to keep our best people. A 3% raise, I think somebody said one of our school districts, not locally, but maybe Greenville was given a 3% raise this year. We're going to have to give a raise at some point in the next 7 years to be competitive. And look what it does to these numbers. We're still, if you're raising the maximum increase every year, we still have $4.8 million deficits as soon as you give a raise that we got to find cuts. You would have to cut a cumulative of $29.1 million over that 7-year period just to give the raises to the teachers. These numbers don't work. Again, the people that come here spend money, they feed our businesses. If our schools, and we experience this with the litigation over Chapin High School and the delays of the construction, people stopped moving to this community and they started moving to Lexington 1. If they had a desire to be in a rural community or a bedroom community to Columbia near the lake, and what you're trading is the people that are coming here to spend money in our businesses. And what I would suggest to you is you look again on the chart on the left, and again, these columns represent the taller they are, the more people are spending. And K through 12 overlaps almost perfectly with people going into their peak, the acceleration of their family spending. Most of that spending is done locally. Most of that spending is done in our community. If we stop funding our schools, it's not implausible that we're going to look like the box on the right. that more of our population is going to be empty nesters and retired citizens, and they don't spend as much money. And our businesses are going to have a lot more problems than the investment that they would take in these schools if the people that fund these schools stop coming here. And I really believe, again, we've got to take long-term views on the decisions we make, because if we say we're going to leave millage behind today, we got to talk about what we're going to cut today. And that cut is going to be there forever, because there's not going to be money to bring that back. And what we really have to do is start a conversation with our General Assembly to try to change the mechanism by which we're funded. When Act 388 came about, there was about a 2-year period. And we had Nathan Ballantyne at the graduations and was talking to him. And I had a chance to go over and show this to him, explain this to him, and told him that we wanted to come talk with our local legislators. And he invited us to come back and do that. But he also told me 2 things. He said, number one, the General Assembly is talking about taking more money away from us next year. So this is just going to make this whole scenario even worse if they take more to fund the other school districts. And the second thing is there are no immediate increases in funding coming to the schools in general. I mean, that's what we've learned. And when Act 388 was passed, he also shared with us that some school districts ramped their millage up as much as they could, knowing it was going to be frozen. And when it got frozen, they ended up at higher levels. We didn't do that. This school board has always struggled to balance the budget. And when Act 388 became effective, it was 2007. The next year, the economy crashed. We had a tremendous infusion of federal dollars for 3 or 4 years. That's why this problem hasn't come to bear yet, because it's been masked by the funding we got from the federal government. And now that we're beyond that and we're kind of moving out of this, it's clear we're compounding negatively, and we can't afford to leave any of this money behind. We can't afford not to start talking to the General Assembly about trying to change the way this district's funded and similarly situated districts. And I think, Lynn, you summarized that the people that really got hurt in Act 388 were the districts that had higher socioeconomic, the higher wealth in the community, the ones that have less businesses like we do, because we're a bedroom community to a larger city. And there's 10 or 12 districts like us that are getting severely hurt by this, and hopefully they'll start, if we can start the conversation, hopefully they'll join in with us. But this is more than our decision tonight. What we're doing tonight affects the future immensely.
Ms. Hammond and Ms. Lovelace. Ms. Hammond.
Okay. I have done research to understand fund balance, because ever since I've been on the board, we've talked about it. And I know it started off when I was first on the board, it was at 8%, because I think our policy DB says a minimum of 2 months operating expenses. But then there's a policy DFAB that gives you doesn't give a specific amount and leaves it to flexibility. That being said, I want to tell Mr. White, I know that he makes a really good point about the idea of looking to the future. I think he is so right. I also think he's right about how we've got to take our case to those that make the laws that hamstring us. And I certainly understand the importance, thanks to Mr. Richardson, of what fund balance is designed to do. I understand that. But I also know that if you don't have any savings at the end of the year, you don't get to add anything to your fund balance. And I know how important it is in case bills come in. It was explained to me we might need that fund for an emergency, or it gives us a high credit rating. Understand all that. I would never want to harm that, and I commend this district for where we are and how I would never want to hurt it. But I'm not advocating just year after year, like in your presentation, where if we kept digging into fund balance. I understand that. But I know I went to an event with Dr. Hefner over with Midlands Tech, and I was able to talk to 2 or 3 board members from different districts in the Midlands, Lexington one being one. they are growing faster than us. They have more students, and they are going to do this 17.5 meals, which, you know, we talked about how they concerned about business, and so they said they are, but they have got to do it. But they're also going to use, I think I read 7 million of their fund balance. So there are problems when you're growing really fast, and then I see a problem where we're sort of flat right now. So if we would not make a habit of it, and we realize the importance of a good fund balance, I don't see any need for us to feel like we would hurt the district to use a small amount of it so that we could have ourselves a year to lobby and do some of the exact things like Mr. White has done in talking to our legislators. We've had our little coffees and our breakfasts, and they don't really get us anywhere. We need a really mass movement of school boards and constituents. But just to give you, I mean, and Mr. Richardson was so good about giving me all my information, but like I just took the fund balance for the last 5 years, and it's gone from, say, a 23 million to our 32 million. So sometimes we've had as much as 20.30% in there. So I like to think this may be an emergency. For one thing, I wish, not in this budget, but I'm very sorry that teachers have not, even if they get the step increase, they don't see a raise in it necessarily, Mr. White, because insurance goes up. They're you know, they don't feel when they get their paycheck, it doesn't even show it. And then we have other employees in our district that have capped out in their step increase by 18 years. And they're some of our most valuable employees. So I think what I would like to say to the board is just try to consider the fact if we did not raise it this much now, and I have a motion of an amount to raise it. I know we have to raise it. And like I said, I don't think anybody minds doing that when we need to do it to keep up. And I agree with Mr. White that we don't need to let a year pass we didn't get what we can get. But I think this is extravagant to go this amount when we do have this emergency fund in such a large amount that we could use a small amount of it. So I just want to say to the board, again, I know all 7 of us care the same amount, and I think we just have different ideas of how to get to the same place. And so I certainly appreciate your listening to me and hearing from businesses. The last time, Ms. Hutchinson, you weren't here, we heard from a few, but they said they had to tighten their belt, and maybe we needed to also. And I do think, I applaud you for the cuts Dr. Hefner and his staff did make, but I still think we've got to let our constituents and our teachers and mainly our students know that we are not going to become some of these districts that tax themselves into trouble. And then some of our schools, you know, we keep them equal, but we have more people wanting to move out toward the newer areas. And I think it's so important that we look like we are managing these funds in such a way that we can take care of every school in the future. And I guess I see it a little different. You're looking at the future by taking this money now because we might never get it back. I look at looking after the future, that we are wise stewards of this tax dollar so that we can go back to the public and get what we need if we can't get this 388 fixed. So that's that. I just wanted to say that. Thank you, Ms. Hutchins.
Thank you. Ms. Lovelace.
You know, I know we talk about the General Assembly, and we're talking about, you know, the General Assembly's probably not going to keep cutting and all this stuff. And I was actually thinking about what can we do, and actually, I think we can think out of the box, and you know, and use. You know, we're always we're the district that loves to do something new that nobody's ever done before. You know, and I think this is a time that maybe we can think about how to get revenue by thinking out of the box and not always having to think about the General Assembly or, you know, or what. But, you know, we've got the perfect place right here. And and I'm going to give a couple examples of thinking out of the box with me, is apprenticeship programs for businesses. And I think if you talk to Dr. Couch right now, he can tell you he's actually got a business that he is actually talking to about working with apprenticeship for the business. That will bring, you know, that off. If we do that, and we specify these companies and that we can offer these companies specific things, I just think that will help bring money to the center and or into the district. Also, too, another thing is economic development. I don't think that we really have probably anybody around here that really thinks about bringing industries or some national company to our district. And, you know, why can't we, you know, be a part of this to go out in which to recruit, you know, national companies to bring into our park, you know, our technology park in Chapin. And also, again, we can recruit these individuals to take advantage and complement the students of the district and the center. And I just think that sometimes that we probably, like you say, the General Assembly is not going to probably give us any money. So again, I think if we just think, you know, and use our, you know, and love the fact that we love to do something that nobody's done, I mean, I think this could actually be something that we need to consider doing.
Okay, thank you. Dr. Hefner.
Yes, thank you. I wanted to follow up really on 2 points that have been made. Ms. Hammond mentioned the business community folks who spoke at our meeting on June 8th. I did want to note for the record that we did invite our business advisory council that we have in the district here at the center for a meeting on June 17th. And we went through our budget presentation with them. And there were a number of members of our staff who were present. I don't want to speak for all of them, but the response was that they understand the situation they're in, and we were encouraged to make sure that we continue to be an extraordinary district. So I did want you to know that we did reach out to them to make sure they knew what the proposal was and to give them an opportunity to respond to that. The second thing, during public participation, we heard the statement that our enrollment is less now. I mentioned this at our last meeting, but the figures that I have, that our previous high enrollment mark, I believe, was 2008. It might have been 2007, but on the 135th day, which is where our funding comes from, we were at 16,392. The 135th day this year, we were at 16,461 for an all-time high of 68 higher than we've had previously according to the 135-day count. And while I would still label our enrollment as being fairly stable, the bottom line is we did hit an all-time high for District 5 on our 135th day this year. Thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Dr. Hefner. Mr. Gant.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just wanted to, number one, I want to commend Mr. Richardson and his staff. I know you all have worked extremely hard, and the entire staff at the district, to make those cuts. We have made cuts in this budget. We've drilled down pretty hard in them, and I really appreciate that effort to do that. Dr. Hefner just mentioned these words, and he brought it out in his presentation the last time we met and the prior time, is that this community and what we have in School District 5 is extraordinary. I don't think anybody doubts that. We had a lot of people that spoke at our meeting last time, a lot of business folks, a lot of folks generally concerned. All those people, for the most part, I don't remember anybody being negative, but people they love this district. They love the product. They love the opportunities. And I think that's the thing that we have to protect against in the long run, is we don't slip from the extraordinary to the ordinary. And that's a hard thing to stay on that bubble all the time. Dr. Hefner was just mentioning the business leaders. If you remember, we had a very nice letter from the chamber executive director, I guess, last time. I don't have that letter with me right now, but basically saying, we know you're in a hard time. We know you have to make tough decisions. We realize the value of this school district to our businesses, and I think that's something we can't overlook. A lot of Mr. White's slides and conclusions, I think, are right on point. We've said a lot about Act 388. I don't know what else we can say, but that's an act that put us in part of the situation we're in today. We didn't have a choice in it. It's since had some more tweaking. I think the cap that was put in a few years later, when that came about, I believe is when the provision was put in to allow this look-back provision. And I don't know where we'd be without that today. I think it's unfortunate to have to think of that, but we're in that tight bind. But until our legislature tweaks that, and Ms. Hammond, you mentioned that last time, that there's some surveys going on. I applaud that. I hope it'll occur. But I'm hopeful of that. I think we have to deal with what we have to deal with in the now part of that. Down the road, if that happens, there may be provisions to roll back something if we have the way to do that. But Act 388 has basically put us where we are now. We're growing, and our budget is going in sort of the wrong direction. We're intersecting, where just like the normal things that we're required to do without funding, the step increase, which not all of our employees get, is putting us in this bind year after year. And I think that brings us to another point. We've got to find a way at some point to be able to reward our employees. They're working very hard. A lot of them are beyond that mark that they get a step increase. Thank goodness that's there, but that's something I mean, it's wonderful if the legislature says, you're going to do a step increase. You're going to do it because we're not going to send you any money to do it, but you've got to do it. And that's great. We need to do that. There's a lot of great things going on here. Dr. Hefner, I appreciate what you presented last time, and it gave me cold chills to think about some of the alternatives that go beyond where we are right now. And I know that that's not something you want to do or anybody in this room. So I don't know exactly where it puts us, but that's why I made this motion. I think it gives us the best chance to preserve the reserve fund, because I think we are going to be tapping that down the road. It will intersect. We won't have any choice but to do that. And that wrong direction of that formula is just not helping us. So basically, I think we have something special. I think this is a way to continue it. It doesn't solve our problem. That's got to come, I think, through the legislature. And Johnny, I applaud your efforts too. There are ways, things that might help us an awful lot. I got to visit a district between last board meeting and this board meeting as part of my statewide duties with the School Board Association. But that district had made a really hard choice, led by business leaders, to put in a 1-cent sales tax for the benefit of schools. They weren't struggling with adding millage this year to their budget, and the main reason for that was that offset. But they were led by their business community to do that. So that's something that's hopefully we could even, nobody likes the thought of a tax increase, anything, but that's something I think we have to consider. But I wanted to put those things out there. I don't see things turning around quick enough, and Ms. Hammond, I appreciate your efforts in the right vein to try to get us somewhere. I hate to tap a reserve fund that I think we're going to have to tap out of necessity in a very short term. That's all, Madam Chair.
Mr. Haldewanger.